begin with meaning, with concepts, with etymology, with everything that relates to the subject, so that we can start from what we already have. I have brought you a collection not only of what we know today, but also of what has been thought about pain throughout the ages. About physical pain and moral pain, which are two kinds of suffering, and we often cannot say which one is worse. Moral pain, which has such a profound impact. Spiritual pain, psychological pain, emotional pain, mental pain, all of these affect us deeply, as does physical pain, which comes from illness or a disruption of health. These are two difficult kinds of pain, and sometimes they appear together, which is even harder. How do we position ourselves in the face of this, given that there is no way for us to go through life without confronting it? This is a fact. The world is dual. As long as there is light, there will be darkness. As long as there is high, there will be low. There will be both heat and cold. Duality will always be with us. Therefore, it is impossible for us not to experience pain. It will be with us at some point. How can we face this in the best possible way? Are there mental approaches, ideas, or attitudes that can help us better confront pain in life? So, I'll take you on a historical journey so that we can get to know a bit about what is currently thought and what has been thought about this subject. I began with a very current concept, which comes from the International Association for the Study of PINA 2020 definition, one that is very much oriented toward medical and biological language. They say the following: pain is an unpleasant physical and emotional experience associated with, or similar to that associated with, actual or potential tissue damage. The language is quite complex for us, isn't it? So, what are they saying? Tissue damage means some kind of wound, a rupture on the physical level, or something equivalent to that on the emotional level, and this is what is called pain. Pain, on the physical level, is a rupture of tissue. On the emotional level, it is something equivalent to that in the emotional realm. That's what they mean. It's a modern concept, dating from 2020. This is the concept currently used to define what pain is. I have brought a concept that is a bit more philosophical. It seems to me that this perspective is more understandable for us when viewed through the lens of philosophy. So, what would pain be? A feeling of anguish and suffering in the face of a stimulus, whether internal or external, that is aggressive or perceived as such. It may even be that it isn't actually aggressive, but you believe it is. And there, pain is already present. How many times throughout our lives do we suffer over things we imagined would be painful, but never even experienced to know for sure? In fact, whether they truly were or not. Do you realize that we spend our whole lives suffering because of phantoms? One day, you finally go through that experience and realize, oh, it didn't hurt as much as I thought. And we spent years of our lives fearing that thing. Perhaps it's even like that with death itself. Maybe it will be the same. We fear it so much, so deeply, and maybe when we get there, we'll say, oh, it wasn't such a big deal after all. It wasn't all that. It was much simpler than I imagined. So, that which is perceived as aggressive, or is in fact aggressive, that in some way threatens our physical and psychological balance. That is pain. I'm defining this so that we can start from a shared understanding. Within Greek mythology, in Hesiod's Theogony, during the time of Hesiod and Homer, the archaic Greek era, Hesiod wrote a book called Theogony, in which he listed the names of the gods. These were the first gods who emerged in the Greek pantheon. And then he speaks of a goddess named Eris. This goddess was not well regarded at all. She is the goddess of darkness, the goddess of all evils one can imagine, of hatred, of all discord, of every kind of problem. And she has many children, each one more monstrous than the last. And one of these children is precisely Algia, who represents the pains that make us weep. It is interesting, because this is a very broad concept. Both physical and moral pains can bring us to tears. Sometimes, it is very difficult. Sometimes, I stop to reflect on what must be the greatest pain a human being can experience. Then I think of one, and then I think, no, that other one is even stronger. That other one, what could be the greatest pain of humanity? We go through a series of painful circumstances in our lives, considering our own limitations. Sometimes, we learn that humanity has endured truly terrible situations. We are still within a cycle that we can call the pandemic, during which some people lost more than one family member to something like this. How terrible, isn't it? How terrible. I believe this must be one of the worst pains we can ever experience. The loss of a loved one. Just as humanity has gone through so many situations throughout history, just as we have subjected one another, because many of our pains are caused by humanity itself, many of them, just as we have inflicted pain on each other. And this Algia, then, would be this Lady of Sorrows, the goddess of pain. It might seem strange to you, but is there really a goddess for pain? Well, if there is a goddess for pain, it means that, for Greek mythology, pain was necessary. Human beings needed it for something. Have you ever managed to do that? The philosopher is always engaging in imaginings, proposing ideas to imagine. Have you ever imagined an entire life without any pain at all? Would that really be a good thing? Would we actually grow? Or would we all just stay quiet, standing still, because nothing is bothering us? When absolutely nothing is bothering me, do I really feel a strong desire to move forward, to go ahead, to overcome? Overcome what? Everything is so comfortable. What would our lives be like without any pain at all? It seems that, according to mythology, Algia is considered a goddess, which means she is fulfilling a necessary role. In other words, pain has a necessary place within human life. It is good for us to reflect on this. At my age, if people ask me what were the most important moments in my life, the ones that made me grow the most, I will probably remember painful moments. Isn't that so? Have you ever had this experience as well? The moments when I grew the most, I will remember as painful moments. There is a certain tendency in human beings that when situations are pleasurable, they do not reflect. Have you noticed this? We enter a kind of euphoria, we celebrate, but we do not reflect. When you suffer, you reflect. That's when you stop, think, look at what happened, where it came from, why it happened. When we suffer, we truly reflect. And we need to reflect. So, there are a number of things we can consider to bring us closer to the topic. The Epicurean and Stoic schools are two moral schools from Rome. Both believed that we should have serenity to face moral pains. Ideally, we would be able to have serenity to face all kinds of pain. But at the very least, when it comes to moral pain, such as sadness, anguish, and loss, at least for these, we should have the serenity to face them. There should be something that, for us, is more valuable than what life threatens to take away from us. We should have trust in life. There should be an entire psychological framework that allows us to rise above our pains. There is something I always do whenever I find myself in a painful situation. It's a habit, you see? I offer this as advice, as an observation for you. Perhaps it will be useful. Every time I go through a painful, difficult, or complex situation, I always think that I should only come out of it greater than when I went in. That I come out on the other side, even if it's just a little, even if it's just a millimeter greater than when I entered. Otherwise, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. What would it be then? Masochism? What kind of life is it where I suffer without any purpose? Let me come out on the other side, even if just a little, greater than when I went in. Then it starts to make sense. But you realize that, in order to go through this, you need to have a very specific attitude toward pain. And truly want to make it a staircase, so that you can climb and reach a new level of consciousness. Just as a point of curiosity, the Epicureans. They had what they called the tetrapharmakos, or 4 remedies, which they believed Epicurus, the great founder of the school, believed were capable of alleviating any pain. This is really just a curiosity, because honestly, the tetrapharmakos, at least for me, none of the 4 remedies work for absolutely anything. Iona. It is completely ineffective. But Epicurus believed that, with these 4 remedies, he could relieve anyone's pain. The first was, there is nothing to fear from the gods. He said that one of the sources of pain is the fear that the gods, for the polytheists, or God, for those who are monotheists, might punish me for something. He would say, "Look, if gods exist, they don't care about you at all. Therefore, you can feel relieved, because they won't do anything to you, neither good nor bad. So, in this regard, you can already feel at ease." We fear some kind of pain, we fear some kind of suffering, and suffering comes through sensations. Suffering is sensory, it comes through our sensations. When you die, your sensations die as well. So, how could you possibly suffer in death? You won't have any sensation at all, it won't hurt, there's simply no way. So, be at peace regarding death. It shouldn't hurt. You won't feel anything anymore. Personally, I don't feel at ease with this explanation, but anyway. Thirdly, he would say the following: happiness is possible. In other words, there's no point in letting yourself be consumed by anguish, thinking that life is just a valley of pain. Happiness is possible, and it lies in the health of the body and the serenity of the spirit. Because you shouldn't go chasing after grand joys, don't seek excessive pleasure. Desire a balanced, simple life, filled with small pleasures, and in this way, you can sustain yourself throughout life. He used to say that a person should live for pleasure, but not for too much pleasure, because that will cloud your spirit. So, happiness is possible if you have modest ambitions. If you desire simple things, happiness is within reach. And finally, he would say, we can escape pain, because suffering does not last, or it is eventually assimilated. If your suffering is minor, it will soon pass. If your suffering is great, before long you will grow accustomed to it. I don't know what he'll say, I don't know what he'll say. And he truly believed that people would find comfort in this. In any case, it was something that gained a lot of popularity for a time, and he genuinely believed he could ease human suffering with these 4 arguments. It didn't work out very well, it must be said. So, in India, they also have a concept regarding pain. It is quite fascinating. In the ancient Indian traditions, they say that there are basically 3 types of pain, or 3 forms of dukkha. These are the 3 that are presented here. The first of them is called adhibhautika. It is the pain caused by external beings or things. We must learn to respond to it with justice and balance. What does this mean? There will be people who cross your path who are unjust and treat you poorly, just as there will be those who are fair and treat you well. The world is dual. There will be someone who treats you in a way that hurts you, and there will be someone who, suddenly, offends you. You must learn, in the face of these aggressions that arise in daily life because of our interactions with other human beings, to be just without letting yourself be overly shaken. Well, something was done that hurt me, so let us apply justice to it. But let me not feel so deeply wounded or offended. Otherwise, I'll sour my own life. Because this will be constant, it will happen many times. So, if someone offends me, that is their problem. I did not accept that offense. There is a well-known Zen story that speaks about this. Perhaps some of you already know it. It tells of a master, a Zen master, who one day was challenged by a young man from another monastery, a young man who was a great martial artist, and he came to challenge the master. When he arrived, he began to hurl a barrage of insults at the master. He said the worst things to him, insulted him in every possible way, and yet the master remained very calm. Eventually, the young man gives up, because he simply cannot offend the master in any way, and he leaves. The disciples then ask, "But master, how could you listen to so many insults and not let yourself be affected at all? How did you manage to do that?" He replied, "Well, if someone wants to give me a gift and I do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong? It's yours, isn't it? You have to take it back with you." He wanted to offer me these offenses as a gift, but I did not accept them, so he took them back with him. This is something interesting, according to the Indians, in this ancient wisdom. If you learn how to respond to these things, I know they won't affect you as much. Well, I need to be just. I need this person to be brought to some kind of judgment, so that they don't go around doing this to everyone. But not because I hate them, or because I have been deeply shaken by it. I know how to conduct myself in such a way that I am fair, I do what needs to be done, and I continue my life with lightness. I don't spend my life in bitterness just because someone offended me. So, for them, this is the first thing. Debaltica consists of not letting the everyday pains of living together affect you so deeply. Be just, but do not remain attached to this event for the rest of your life. Then comes the second type of pain for ancient India. This is called Daidivika, which means belonging to Daiva or destiny, to invisible or divine forces, including karmic consequences. Learn to accept it with the necessary purification. What does this mean? There are things I did wrong in the past. For those who believe in other incarnations, perhaps in previous lives. For those who do not believe, even in this very life, I have made mistakes. And these mistakes are causes that will produce effects. At some point, this will come back to me. Well, have patience, have acceptance. Understand that these are effects of causes I have created. And therefore, I have a debt, and I must pay it with sobriety and nobility. And not despair because of it. To know that the mistakes I have made will, in some way, return to me at some point, so that I may settle this account. This is the law of karma, cause and effect. Therefore, in the face of these things, a person must understand that, until they are completely purified, to the point of not acting. Not even a millimeter outside the law, not even a millimeter outside the Dharma, which is the great law of the universe, the arm of God extended over the cosmos, until they act precisely in accordance with the law, they will make mistakes, and those mistakes will have consequences. And in the same way that we accept, for example, within a school system, if I do poorly on a test, I know I will have to go to remedial classes. I know I will have to take a makeup exam. I know I will have to do some extra work to make up for that bad grade I received. It's part of the process. Therefore, we must accept this karmic mechanism of life with sobriety. I know that I have made mistakes, and those mistakes will come back to me. When they return, I'll be able to accept them with sobriety. I know that I truly made a mistake, and I will correct my behavior based on what I have learned from this experience. And then comes the third pain, which for them is considered the mother of all pains. It is the worst of all pains. And it truly is the worst of all pains, which is Dhyatmika. Dhyatmika literally means Atma, or soul. And it includes the suffering caused by our own mind, through the failure to recognize ourselves as spirit. Regarding this, a person must act throughout their entire life. This is the mother of all pains. In simple terms, within us there is a divine essence that came into the world to fulfill a purpose. Then you wrap this divine essence in a personality. This personality becomes completely alienated, turned outward. It wants to survive at any cost. It seeks pleasures. It wants entertainment. It wants to stand out. It wants this. It wants that. At no point does it open a window for that essence, which came into the world, to say a single word. To say why it came, for what purpose, what it came to do in the world. At no moment do you give space for your soul to express itself. The personality closes off the stage and takes complete control of it. It does not allow anything from within you to be expressed. It is said that this is the worst of all pains, the mother of all suffering. I remember once, many years ago, I always share this detail because I found it so meaningful, symbolically. I had a dream in which I was pregnant and did not want to let the child be born. At the moment of childbirth. For some reason, I was afraid of something. I don't remember the details. I just know that I held onto my belly and didn't want to let the child be born. And the pain was unbearable. That image stayed with me. It left a deep impression on me. Do you know what it's like to have something growing inside you, yearning to come to life, and you don't allow it? Imagine how much of our pain must come from that. Frustrations, anxieties, depressions. There is something within us that came into this world to fulfill a purpose. That came into the world to accomplish a mission, and we don't allow it. Our time is entirely consumed by trivialities, by superficial matters, by things that are absolutely unimportant. And I don't have a moment for inner life. I don't have a moment where I express who I truly am. It is said that this causes a process similar to childbirth, one that cannot be completed. You are not allowing yourself to be born into the world. And pain arises. Pain that, at times, we do not know how to interpret. What kind of pain is this? And then we search for 1,000 other causes. Perhaps when something hurts and you don't know what it is, what do? You will associate it with things you already know. I am feeling pain because, when I was a child, my mother did such and such. There, I have found someone to blame for my pain. But that's not it. You are suffering because you are alienated from your own soul. But since it hurts, you feel you must find someone to blame. I'm suffering because so and so broke up with me. In other words, it's a romantic pain. That's not it. You are suffering because you can no longer bear your own self. You cannot stand living in constant flight from yourself the way you do. You can no longer endure being so alienated the way you are. That is why you are suffering. But since we do not want to address or heal this pain, we also choose not to see it. And so, we go on living with pains, assigning stereotypical sources to them. It's always the same things. But in truth, they are not. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. It wasn't because your mother said something, nor because your partner broke up with you, nor because your job is like this or that. It wasn't any of that. That's not what it was. It was frustration. When you are alone with yourself, you cannot bear the frustration you feel about the kind of life you are living. The years go by. One day, there's that birthday celebration, people singing happy birthday to you. You start to count, how old am I? How many cycles have I completed? What have I done with my dreams? Nothing. What have I accomplished that gives my life value here on earth? Nothing. What have I done? I survived. Trying to enjoy it as much as possible, I survived, but nothing. Let's just survive. Even a plant survives. You are a little more endowed with resources than a plant, my friend. Just a little, but still, you could do more, I believe. Therefore, this is what we call Jatimika. This name comes from Atman, which in India is the term for the most spiritual element of a human being. It means your soul is pressing to be born, and yet you do not allow it to be born. It is a birth that is blocked, interrupted. It is the mother of all pains. And sometimes, we give it other names and do not realize that what is hurting is actually this. This is something quite interesting. It is said that a person who is at peace with their own soul, who accomplishes things about which they can say, I made a difference in the world, I contributed, I did something of value, such a person is well prepared even for death. He knows that if he were to leave the world at this moment, it would be all right. I'll leave behind a number of things unfinished. There was room to do more, but I have already done something. I did not live in vain. My presence in the world has already made a difference. I did not live in vain. If a person is certain that their life is making a difference in the world, then probably most of the pains that people suffer would not exist. Because most of it comes from there. And we do not know how to trace it back to the source. Let us talk a little about the pain of the vehicles. It is important for us to understand this. On the physical plane, when there is pain, what is missing? Health is missing. There is an imbalance. That is when we have a medical science that is fantastic, that is constantly modernizing, and is full of resources. We'll need to seek out a professional and see what is missing for the balance of our organism, what is lacking for our health. All right, physical pain, that's how it is. Happiness and healing resources. Now, pain on the emotional level. What could be missing for this pain to manifest? In general, what is missing, among other things, is a great lack of trust in life. Do you notice that sometimes, when things happen, we feel completely helpless, as if it were a great injustice and you had no one to turn to? During the pandemic, I encountered a whole host of people online asking me this question. Why does God allow the pandemic? And honestly, I wasn't able to schedule a conversation with God to ask for details about his plan. But what I stopped to reflect on is this. There is meaning behind every experience in the world. There is a reason. Nothing happens by chance. When a person believes that the world is random, that life is random, they believe that at any moment something might fall on their head, not because there is any necessity, but simply because they were unlucky. This so-called institution of bad luck is a tremendous misconception. Just like its opposite, luck, there is neither luck nor misfortune. There is the law of necessity, which gives each person what is appropriate for them at every moment. If I trust that life works this way and knows what it must give to each person at every moment, I believe that whatever happens to me is because I needed that experience. And this brings me a profound sense of calm. Trusting in life gives us a great sense of peace. When you believe that everything is chaos, you think, this is an injustice. What I'll do? There is no recourse. The universe is chaos. But when I believe that the universe is cosmos, sooner or later, I'll understand the purpose of this experience. Sooner or later, I'll understand why I had to go through it. Because it has meaning. Everything has meaning, so why wouldn't this experience have it as well? So, sooner or later, I'll understand it, and this brings a profound sense of calm. Therefore, psychological pains, they are, above all, overcome, or rather, endured, through trust in life and serenity. It is the ability to manage our emotions and remain serene. Mental pain. What is missing? Why do we sometimes experience mental pain? And we do experience it. Mental pain is not just a headache, no. It is truly the pain of not knowing who you are amidst the clamor of the world. A lack of identity, a lack of your own ideas. You look in the mirror and ask, who are you, human being? What do you think? What are the things you believe in? Where do you want to go? There are no answers, none at all. You feel you have to look at what everyone else is doing in order to respond, because I never stop to think about these things. I have to try to see what is trending, reflect on that, to figure out what I think, because I haven't built my own ideas. There is nothing that is truly mine. In other words, am nobody. When you take and conduct a survey, let's say I create a questionnaire with about 10 questions, and then I gather statistics and see the average responses from people in Brazil at this moment regarding these 10 questions, and then I take one, another, yet another individual, and their individual answers match exactly with the average, what can I deduce from that? They did not think for themselves, they were thought for. They simply cloned what everyone else is thinking. There is no hint of personal reflection. No nuance of having paused to contemplate one's own life. No shade of truly knowing oneself. There is none of that, nothing at all. They think what everyone else thinks. And that hurts, you know. It really hurts. It creates a terrible emptiness. I don't know who I am a stranger to myself. I remember, and I always share this in my lectures, because it was an experience that deeply marked me. When I joined New Acropolis, I was just a young woman. And my teacher came up to me and asked, tell me something. In your day, what made you happy? What are the things in your life that bring you happiness? And I didn't know how to answer. I was 24 years old, and I didn't know what made me happy. I got home and started to reflect on it. There was a moment when I was at a happy hour, but I wasn't happy at all. I don't drink, everyone else was drinking, and honestly, I felt upset. Oh, the moment when I was at that other place. No, I wasn't happy there either. So why am I doing these things if none of them bring me happiness? Because everyone else does them. And when was I truly happy? Oh, it was the moment when I was working with the soil and planting a rosebush. Well, now I've discovered what truly brings me happiness. Then I stood in front of the mirror and said, how is it possible that at 24 years old, you don't even know what makes you happy? What have you been doing for these 24 years? It's incredible. This lack of self-knowledge, this complete anonymity in which we live before ourselves. That hurts as well. That's where the so-called mental pains come from, lack of identity, lack of original ideas, not knowing who you are within the grand scheme of the world. Spiritual pain. A lack of inner life. A lack of reflection, a lack of internal dialogue, a lack of practicing virtues. There is a lack of allowing your soul to express itself. This is very similar to what India mentioned just a moment ago. So, starting from the impermanence of the material, discover within yourself something of a lasting nature, something that gives meaning to everything else. Act according to spiritual values. Pause for a moment and look at the things that make you happy, the things you possess. Will any of them stay with you forever? Probably not. The house? No. The car? No. The clothes? No. Even the people around us, if they are older than we are, it is likely they will not stay with us forever. Isn't that so? Everything is impermanent. Don't you think this is a source of anguish? Human beings need things that do not fade away. We need a dose of eternity. For example, when I love justice and strive to be just, when I love generosity and seek to be generous, I can look in the mirror and assure myself, I will be generous as long as I breathe. I will be just as long as I breathe. That will never leave me. Do you know why? Because I'll allow it. Consciousness is born from contrast, my friends. In the contrast between what endures and what fades away, you discover who you truly are. We are much more connected to those things that endure than to those that pass. The sum of these enduring things is our identity. And if we find nothing enduring, life becomes tremendously distressing. These are spiritual pains. The lack of an inner life. A lack of reflection on what is true, amidst all these things that are constantly being taken from us. What remains? What endures? Finally, I wanted to share a reflection with you about this, which I found interesting. Notice that everything we discussed on this last page, about physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, and spiritual pain, is always because something is missing. Don't you find that curious? Isn't it interesting? Therefore, pain is more connected to the future than to the past. Why I'm suffering? Because someone did something to me. But that's not really the reason. You are suffering because the virtue you should have possessed, so that this would not offend you, you did not have. The attitude you should have taken, you did not know how to take. The value I should have achieved, I did not know how to attain. Therefore, I suffer because of what lies in the future, because of a lack. Why did that person affect me? Because I was so vulnerable that I allowed myself to be hurt. Because I gave so much importance to the opinions of others that I let them wound me. In other words, there are things missing within me. Suffering is much more related to the future than to the past. There comes a point where, when faced with a painful situation, I recommend this reflection to you. Ask yourselves, what am I lacking here? So that this would not have affected me. Someone hurt you, someone wounded you, or some situation offended you. What is missing within me to protect myself so that this would not have hurt me? Then you will realize that perhaps you are a little behind the rhythm of life. Because life has its own plan, it keeps bringing new experiences. What should you have done? You should have been acquiring virtues in order to withstand these experiences. Life moved faster than you did. It brought you an experience, and you had not yet developed the virtue needed. You were left behind. In other words, we generally suffer not because of what happened, but because of the virtue we needed to have, which we do not yet possess, which still lies ahead in the future. It is out of lack that we suffer, from what we have not yet built within ourselves, much more than from what is in the past. It is because of what is in the future. It is important for us to recognize this. That event revealed to you that something essential is missing, and therefore, it is something you must urgently seek to develop. Let us continue. Pain is not a sign of disgrace. This is a delicate matter to address, but it is one we must discuss. Pain does not mean you are a bad person who deserves to suffer. That does not exist. Pain can very well arise because you did everything right, and now it is time to move on to the next experience. Can it not? A child who did everything right in 3rd grade, did everything properly, passed the year, now has to move on to 4th grade, where classmates change, teachers change, and he will have to adapt again. That is painful. Change is painful. But why is change painful? Because he did the previous stage well. And now he has to move on to the next one. Imagine if every time we suffered, it was because we did something wrong. That would be a kind of sinister view of life. So, I'm making mistakes all the time. That is not how it is. It is not a punishment because you did something wrong. It is because, at this moment, life had this planned for you. Because you need to learn and you need to grow. And on the other hand, pain is not a sign of failure. It does not mean that you are a bad person. Nor is pain a sign of merit. There is also this mentality. I have to suffer in order to purify myself. This pain will serve to pay for my sins. This comes a lot. It's delicate to say, but it's true. It comes a lot from a mistaken Christian mentality. Sometimes, since Christ suffered greatly, I think I must suffer too, because that is what is right. I'm Jesus Christ. But that's not how things work. Oh, because if I suffer, I'll purify my sins. Can you imagine any divine being whom you believe in, be it God, Jesus, or any master from any religion, who would take any pleasure in seeing you suffer? Why, for heaven's sake, would you inflict unnecessary suffering on yourself, thinking that this would please God? Why would you want any of his children to suffer for no reason? It is one thing for us to face necessary pains with proper dignity. It is quite another to invent suffering. And this does happen. Oh, I'm such a sufferer, I will receive the kingdom of heaven. No, the kingdom of heaven is for people who are wiser. Not for those who spend their lives pricking their fingers with needles. That is the hell of the masochists. Right? The kingdom of heaven is not about that. So, these misunderstandings exist on both sides. And within the Christian mindset, I repeat, many times, the Middle Ages were full of this. So people would whip themselves, tormenting their own bodies, believing that by doing so, they would receive some kind of indulgence for their sins. We might think that now we have moved past this, but we have not. We still see this, and quite a lot. Well, pain is part of the duality of life and can, indeed, be used as a vehicle for consciousness. This is the foundation of the mindset in another religion, which is Buddhism. Buddhism is a particularly interesting religion in this regard because it was born from the desire to overcome pain. Its entire structure was built around this concept. Therefore, it offers some very insightful guidance on this subject. Imagine a 15-year-old boy, a teenager. And one day, he discovers that people grow old, people get sick, and people die. Then he decided, this 15-year-old boy, to say the following, "Will not rest until I have freed humanity from pain." And he left. And he did not rest until he found a path to liberation from suffering. A person is defined by the magnitude of their challenges. Imagine a problem of this scale in the life of a 15-year-old boy. How great must this human being have been to accomplish what he did? This was Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. He was deeply concerned with overcoming the suffering of humanity, to find a path for humanity to transcend its pain. A boy who, upon seeing an elderly person, a sick person, and a dead person, declared, "I'll free humanity from these great sorrows." And he built an entire doctrine upon this quest to overcome suffering. This is the doctrinal foundation of Buddhism. Let us explore a bit further, out of curiosity. Here are some reflections that are worth considering before we delve into the question of suffering in Buddhism. It is necessary to understand that pain is a signal from the body for you to take action. Act. Take your hand out of the fire. That is what pain tells us. Don't eat that anymore, says discomfort. Don't engage with that person anymore, says sadness. Isn't that so? Isn't that the voice of pain? It points out exactly what needs to be corrected. If, instead of lamenting, you are able to engage in a dialogue with it. The wise person converses with pain and absorbs its counsel. Every pain has something to tell you. Engage in dialogue with it and discover what it advises you. What needs to be achieved? What needs to be overcome? What lies ahead in the future that we must achieve in order to move beyond that situation? And what are the elements from the past that we need to leave behind? Instead of carrying my moral pain as a burden, could I use it as a tool? Have you ever noticed that overcoming pain sometimes brings us an extraordinary level of enlightenment? Great thoughts are born from pain. Overcoming it is a magnificent moment. When you are able to synthesize and understand why you are suffering and you overcome the pain, that is a grand moment of elevated consciousness, of learning, of maturity. Overcoming pain means, congratulations, you have grown. Isn't that so? One fine day, you sit down and reflect on everything that has happened, everything that is tormenting you. You come to a conclusion. You know what? All of this happened because I didn't take a certain stance, so now I will, and I'm going to put an end to this. I'm going to end this right now. And you manage to do it. And the pain is left behind. This is a moment of maturity, a glorious moment. Overcoming pain through an act of will, consciously, by learning something new, can help you ascend many steps in life. And that is, in fact, the very reason it exists. So, we should seek out this glorious moment where we synthesize the reason for our pain and find a way out of it. Now, let's briefly explore, since this isn't the main focus of the talk, just a few ideas from the Buddhist perspective on pain, which is quite interesting. They present the Four Noble Truths. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, when he achieved the overcoming of suffering, arrived at this synthesis, the Four Noble Truths. The first of these is about suffering. What is suffering? Suffering is something that is part of life. Birth is suffering, death is suffering, and along the way, there are 1,000 forms of suffering. Suffering is an inherent part of life. Therefore, suffering is a natural mechanism of life. This is the first noble truth about suffering. The second noble truth concerns the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is the attachment you have to things that you will inevitably lose. In other words, everything in life is fleeting, everything is transitory. I become attached to something that, before long, will be gone, because that is part of the flow. And I cling to it desperately, and I suffer. The cause of suffering is our desire to claim as our own things that are only temporary. Not even this, my physical body, truly belongs to me. At a certain point, it too will be taken away. Therefore, I should attach myself to things that are permanent. If I hold on to my generosity, to my capacity for altruism, these cannot be taken from me. Perhaps not even death can take these away from me. Now, if I choose to cling to my long hair, to my wrinkle-free skin, to my... Look, you are going to suffer, you are going to suffer. There is no doubt, every time we try to freeze what is meant to flow, what must follow its own path, we are condemning ourselves to suffering. Therefore, the second noble truth speaks about the cause of suffering. Tanha, the thirst for sensory pleasures. Being attached to that which we will inevitably lose. The third noble truth tells us that it is possible to overcome suffering. It is possible to live in a world where pain exists and yet not be consumed by it. It is possible to transcend suffering. And the fourth noble truth reveals the path to overcoming suffering, which is what? The Buddhist tradition calls the Noble Eightfold Path. So, we have already discussed the Four Noble Truths. Now, let us explore the Noble Eightfold Path. It is important for you to understand that the Noble Eightfold Path consists of 8 elements, 8 actions that a person must undertake. Symbolically, it represents everything you will do in your life. Everything must be done in a righteous and noble manner. When I do something, for example, here we have the Noble Eightfold Path. When I hold right views, my intention is that people will say, wow, how wise he is, how good his opinions are. What an interesting citizen, look at how he speaks, always saying appropriate things. But, my dear friend, I'll lose that. Sooner or later, someone will come along who does not like what I'm saying. Today I'm famous, tomorrow I'm completely ignored. Today they flatter me, tomorrow they detest me. The world is dual, that's how it is. That you'll let go of. Now, do you know why I want to have right views? Because I want to be a righteous person, regardless of what others may think. I seek integrity. Ah, I see. Good. Then you are cultivating something you can truly sustain. Because if you are upright, you can remain so until the very last moment of your life. No one can take that away from you. Therefore, you ensure that you possess something that is permanent. And that is the way. It is the noble lens, that is. Right views, right intentions, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. 8 upright actions. I say it is symbolic because it represents everything you might do in life. Upright is the way you access the internet. Does it fit? It fits. Upright is the way you ride the elevator. Does it fit? It fits. Upright in everything you do in life. This is the noble path. It seeks to summarize all the activities of life. That you do them all in an upright way. Do you know what this means? I'll remove my desire for reward, for recognition for these actions, and I will place it in uprightness. I'm happy simply because I acted uprightly, not because people recognized what I did, not because I achieved some kind of success, not because I gained some kind of profit within society, no. It is not for material results, but for uprightness itself. If I acted uprightly, unhappy, what will come as a result? That does not concern me so much. It is one thing to want to grow as a human being, to want to become greater, that is a dream. But it is not that you are desperate in pursuit of this. All the time. With every step you take, you must be happy with what you have. With the beauty of what life gives you at every moment. It is remarkable how life gives us beautiful things at every moment, every single day. The other day, I stepped outside my house to gather the clothes that were hanging on the clothesline. Just a moment, a simple thing. I looked and saw the clothes of the people I love, my family members, dancing on the clothesline. I imagined, well, those things that wrap our bodies with such dignity, that allow us to act, that allow us to do what we need to do in life. Look how beautiful it is. It seems as if they are there, telling our story to the wind. And it truly was a beautiful scene, those fabrics flying in the wind, as if they were telling our story to the wind. I thought that was a beautiful moment. I stopped to watch the dance of the clothes on the clothesline. It's beautiful. It's beautiful when you see a little plant here, making that effort to break through the earth above it. What a miracle life is. Something like that is truly incredible. Every moment is filled with beauty. Why should I be anxious about something that will only happen in the future? What kind of life is that? What kind of happiness is that? To the point that someone comes onto a YouTube network and recommends this as universal happiness. You have to have desire, you have to be desperate for something, otherwise you'll become apathetic. How lost we are, aren't we? How lost we are. So, no one can be happy with what they have. You have to be desperate to achieve something else, which also doesn't belong to you. Therefore, you're going to lose that too. Then you become desperate for something else. In other words, life becomes a way of the cross of despair. What is this? What the Noble Eightfold Path is proposing, understand this, is that you should desire righteousness, not the final outcome of what you did, whether people liked it or not, whether it was successful or not. You should desire righteousness. Did I act righteously? Excellent. Was I recognized? No. Ah, okay, that's fine. But I did what I had to do. I left my mark on the world. I did things the way I was meant to do them. I was a human being. Whoever crossed my path today encountered a human being. Therefore, I am worthy of a happy day. Of the sleep of the just, I did what was my responsibility. This is yet another form of pain that our society cultivates. The despair of reaching something that lies ahead. Then you run and run and run, and when you finally reach that thing, it turns out it wasn't that great after all. It wasn't worth your desperation. So then you feel you have to become desperate for something else. Isn't that so? To the point where this is even recommended as a model for living. I found that very curious. So, for Buddhism, that's it. Act with integrity. And you will overcome the pain. Much of our pain comes from the anguish and expectations we project onto life. So I brought you some quotes that I believe are among the most beautiful things ever written about pain. They are by Khalil Gibran. I know our time is almost up, but it is truly worthwhile to get to know The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which is a wonderful book for those who are not yet familiar with it. He speaks about pain, and some of his statements are completely aligned with everything we've discussed so far. As a reflection, so that we can have a beautiful conclusion, let us talk about the meaning of pain in human life. So, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. You break that shell that surrounded you, that prevented you from seeing reality. It is as if you are opening a door. So, your pain is what allows you to break through barriers and come closer to your own essence. Your pain breaks the shells that enclose your understanding. Just as the seed of a fruit must break so that its heart can appear before the sun, so too must you come to know pain. Something must be broken, something must be left behind. That hurts. But from this, too, something new will be born and fill that space. If your hearts could always remain in awe of the daily miracle of your lives, your pain would seem no less wondrous to you than your joy. You pause to reflect on your life. How meaningful was that moment when I was suffering? How did I strive, in that moment, to position myself in the best way possible as a human being? How I tried to live my pain with dignity, how I sought to overcome it in the best way possible. It is a moment as beautiful as any other. Don't you see that? When you look back and remember a moment of pain, don't you find yourselves beautiful for having overcome it? Don't you think that moment was sacred? If we had this understanding that everything in life is necessary, everything would seem that way to us. Beautiful, even the painful moments. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, just as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would wait with serenity through the winters of your affliction. In other words, we have autumn, winter, spring, and summer, and we prepare ourselves. We know there will be cold, we know there will be heat. We know when it is time to plant, and we know when it is time to harvest. And if we are prepared for this, we do not suffer. There will be moments of loss, and there will be moments of gain. There will be times when everyone loves me, and there will be times when many do not love me. There will be times when people recognize me, and times when they completely forget about me. Am I prepared for all the seasons of life? Because life is cyclical, will it not pass through all of them? Inevitably. And if we are not prepared, we will be caught by surprise. By colder cold than we can bear, or by heat greater than we can endure. To know that life is cyclical, just as the seasons are. And it will bring us a wide variety of moments. And ensure that we are prepared for them. Many of your pains, you yourselves have chosen. It is the most bitter remedy with which your inner healer cures your ailing self. Sometimes we'll see, I don't know, a very greedy person, someone who wants to possess many things, who wants to own so much. That person is asking for a test for themselves, to go bankrupt, in order to learn to value other things in life. That is what they are asking for. Once I read a text that, in fact, spoke a little about this. When a person asks God, for example, to learn to have patience, what are they really asking for? For God to put an annoying person in their life. Because that is how one acquires patience. Through our shortcomings, we could understand what we are truly asking of life. We are asking for experiences that will give us the level we need to keep moving forward. We are the ones who choose, because if we want to grow, life listens. Oh, they want to grow. I'll send exactly the challenges that will touch on those points they need to work on. Unconsciously, it is we who ask this of life. Therefore, trust the physician and take the medicine in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and firm, is guided by the gentle hand of the unseen. And the cup he offers you, though it may burn your lips, was shaped from the clay that the potter moistened with his sacred tears. Everything comes from a purpose. Everything comes from something greater. And pain, therefore, is also sacred. Remember that phrase from the philosopher of the last century, whom I always quote in my lectures, Mircea Eliade. The sacred is the function of giving meaning. If a pain made you grow, does that have meaning? It does. Then it was sacred. If a pain helped me overcome a weakness, does that have meaning? It does. Then it was sacred. Just as sacred as any moment of joy. It was ceremonial. In short, synthesizing everything we have seen in all these traditions. Physical pain signals that something is wrong and needs to be corrected. Moral pain can indicate a moment for growth. Therefore, if you are hurting on the emotional, mental, or spiritual level, pursue it. What you need is growth. On the physical level, you need health. On the subtle levels, you need growth. Life demands growth. Serenity, trust in life, and the will to grow. These are three infallible elements against pain. They are not Epicurus tetrapharmacos, but they are better. They work well. Remember the law of cycles in nature. So you do not expect life to always be linear and always bring the same kind of things. Be prepared for the cycles of life. We would not be who we are without our pains. To reflect on who we are and how much we have grown, we owe it to our pains. Therefore, have greater self-control and more patience with the difficult moments in life. Because they promise to leave you greater than they found you. Remember that initial advice, may I only come out of this trial greater than when I entered it. And finally, this quote from Nietzsche, which I find quite interesting. If you choose the pleasure of growth, prepare yourself for pain. Necessarily. Or we remain stagnant so as not to feel pain. And then comes the worst pain of all, which is the pain of meaning nothing in the world, of having done nothing, of being no one. By running away from pain, we fall into even greater pains. And this is what I would like to offer you as a reflection. I hope that we have approached this issue from various angles, and that it can serve as a meaningful reflection for you on how to face our pains, what to think about them, and the sobriety, balance, and trust in life that we must cultivate in order to confront and respond to them. And a deep love for growth as a purpose in life. We want to leave here greater than when we arrived.